Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. We are here today for a hearing in docket number 2024-81-E. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Caston. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, and Chair Belser. Let me recognize our staff counsel, Mr. Winburn, to read the docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, commissioners and parties. We're here today for the proceeding in docket number 2024-81-E, application of Dominion Energy South Carolina for a certificate of environmental compatibility and necessity for the construction and operation of the Church Creek Charleston transmission 230 kV line and associated facilities pursuant to South Carolina Code Section 5833-10 and Regulation 103-304. The proceeding has been scheduled for today, June 6, 2024 at 10 a.m. All parties participating in this matter are available and the docket appears to be in order. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Winburn. Let's take appearances from the parties. Who's representing Dominion Energy South Carolina?
Good morning, Chair Belser and members of the commission. I'm Chad Burgess, and with me today is Elizabeth Hutton. We're both in-house corporate counsel for Dominion Energy South Carolina, and we're representing the company in this proceeding. It's a pleasure to appear before you, and we appreciate this opportunity to present the company's case.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. You need to speak into that microphone because you're a little hard to hear. Or maybe I'm just getting deaf, so thank you. And who's here for the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff?
Good morning, Chair Belser, Vice Chair Powers, and members of the Commission. Donna Rainey on behalf of ORS, and with me today is Lanice Mitchell.
Thank you and welcome. I'm showing no other interveners. Anybody aware of any of the statutory parties?
No, Chair Belser, I'm not aware of any statutory parties appearing today.
Thank you. Any preliminary matters before we begin?
I'm not aware of any preliminary matters either.
Then, Mr. Burgess, please go ahead with your case.
Oh, thank you, Chair Belser. The company calls Scott Parker and Nathan Bass to the stand. You stand up. Yeah, the court reporter is going to swear you in here in a second.
You would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Parker. Would you please state your full name for the record?
R. Scott Parker.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dominion Energy South Carolina, Manager of Transmission Planning.
And Mr. Parker, did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direct supervision and pre-filed in this docket 11 pages of direct testimony?
I did.
And are there any changes or corrections required of your direct testimony?
There is one.
Okay, would you please direct the parties and the commission to the page number and the line number that requires the correction?
Okay. Page 1, line 5 reads docket number 2024-91E. It should read docket number 2024-81-E.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Are there any other corrections required of your testimony?
No.
And would that change if I ask you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony? Would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belser, subject to the change that Mr. Parker just stated, we would ask that his pre-filed direct testimony be moved into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Parker's pre-filed direct testimony with that one amendment given from the stand will be admitted as if the testimony was delivered from the stand.
Thank you, Chair Belser. Mr. Parker, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please deliver that at this time?
Good morning, Chair Belser and members of the Commission. In my testimony, I discussed the need and necessity for the construction and operation of a new 6.5-mile single-circuit 230 kV transmission line that will be known as the Church Creek Charleston Transmission 230 kV line and the associated facilities in Charleston County, South Carolina, for which the company is seeking a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity in this docket. The line will originate at the company's existing Church Creek substation in Charleston County and run approximately 4.1 miles as it bypasses the company's facilities and substation at Faber Place, continuing 2.4 miles to the company's Charleston transmission substation, which is also located in Charleston County. The company has determined that the line can be built almost entirely within existing right-of-way. However, there are certain points along the route where 4.4 acres of new right-of-way will be procured. In addition to the line, associated facilities to be added to the company's transmission system include a new 230 kV terminal at the Church Creek substation and a new 230 kV terminal and associated bus work at the Charleston transmission substation. Additionally, a 336 MVA 230 to 115 kV transformer and associated equipment will be required at the Charleston transmission substation. As we have done in the past, the company identified the need for this line using the transmission planning standards established by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation as supplemented by the company's own long-range planning criteria. Transmission planning studies indicate that the continued residential, commercial, and industrial development in Charleston County will soon exceed the electrical load service capabilities of the transmission system in the area unless upgrades are made. To address these reliability issues and ensure that the company remains in compliance with North American Electric Reliability Corporation transmission planning standards and its own long-range planning criteria, the Church Creek Charleston transmission 230 kV line and associated facilities will provide the additional electrical capacity needed to serve the existing and future load demands reliably in the Charleston area. If the Church Creek Charleston transmission 230 kV line is not built, then excessive power will flow into the Charleston area, overloading existing transmission facilities. The proposed line and associated facilities presented here, which are scheduled to be completed by May 1st, 2027, serve the interests of system economy and reliability and represent the most cost-effective and acceptable means for the continued transmission of safe, reliable electric power to the company's customers. The public convenience and necessity requires construction of the line and associated facilities as proposed. As such, the company respectfully requests that the Commission issue a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of the Church Creek Charleston transmission 230 kV line and the associated facilities. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I'll now turn to you, Mr. Bass. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Nathan Bass.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed at Pike Engineering, and I'm manager of the Facilities Planning and Siting Department.
And Mr. Bass, did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direct supervision and pre-filed in this docket 13 pages of direct testimony?
I did.
Are there any changes or corrections required of your direct testimony?
Yes, there's one change.
All right, would you please direct the Commission and ORS to the page number and the line number that requires correcting?
So the change is on page 1, line item 5. It reads docket number 2024-91-E. It should read docket number 2024-81-E.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bass. If we've proven anything so far, we're consistent with our mistakes. With that change, Mr. Bass, if I ask you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belzer, we would move into the record the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Bass as amended from the stand and as given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mr. Bass's pre-filed direct testimony as amended from the stand will be admitted into the record as if testified to from the stand.
All right, thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Bass, do you have any exhibits attached to your direct testimony?
I do.
And are there any changes or corrections required of your exhibits?
No.
Chair Belzer, there are 2 exhibits attached to Mr. Bass's pre-filed direct testimony. I'm going to move them into the record one at a time because one of those exhibits has been marked confidential and has been placed under seal by the commission pursuant to a prior commission order. The first one is we would move into the record NVB1 Public, and that is the report attached to Mr. Bass's testimony entitled Transmission Line Siting and Environmental Report for the Church Creek Charleston Transmission 230 kV and associated lines, and we would ask that be marked and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 1.
And NVB-1 does not contain confidential information.
That is correct.
Does it contain the redacted portion of what's confidential?
There's a placeholder in
Okay.
NVB1 for
For
Appendix C,
C.
which indicates that the
Okay.
report behind that initial page
Okay.
it has been filed with the commission under seal.
Mr. Bass's pre-filed direct exhibit NVB1 public version will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 1 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. The second exhibit attached to Mr. Bass's testimony is identified as NVB2 confidential, and that is an unredacted version of Appendix C, and we would ask that that be marked and entered into the record as confidential hearing exhibit number 2.
Mr. Bass's pre-filed exhibit NVB2 confidential will be marked as hearing exhibit number, marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 2 and admitted into the evidence of this case and maintained under seal pursuant to prior commission order.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Bass, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
I have.
Would you please deliver that at this time?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Belzer and members of the commission. As the company's siting and environmental consultant for this line, I am the author of the transmission line siting and environmental report for the Church Creek to Charleston transmission 230 kV and associated facilities, dated March 2024. This report is an exhibit to my direct testimony and details the research and studies conducted regarding the environmental, land use, cultural resource, and visual effects of the line and the associated facilities. In summary, the report concludes that the proposed facilities will have no significant adverse impacts to land use, soils, wetlands and streams, flood zones, wildlife, protected species, cultural resources, visual resources, population centers, environmental justice, or aviation. To the extent practical, the company will design the line to span wetlands. However, in the event that a structure may be required in wetlands, access to it for construction purposes will be accomplished on fiberglass or wooden mats, and no permanent roads will be constructed in the wetlands. Work for structures within open water of the Ashley River and critical area wetlands will utilize mats, and if necessary, a construction barge. No filling or clearing will occur in wetlands or stream buffer zones. Moreover, because of the measures that the company takes to protect wetlands, streams, stream buffer zones, and open waters during transmission line construction, minimal, if any, short-term and no long-term impacts to waters of the United States will occur. Regarding visual impacts, the line will have very low overall visual effects for the following reasons. With the exception of only 4.4 acres of new right-of-way, the line will be built with an existing right-of-way and will, therefore, not pose any significant visual modifications resulting from right-of-way clearing. Additionally, the line will share an existing Dominion Energy right-of-way, parallel or be adjacent to existing Dominion Energy electric and gas transmission or Santee Cooper transmission lines for the line's entire length. Regarding cultural resources, the company engaged Brockington and Associates to conduct background research to identify all previously recorded archaeological and historic resources within 1.2 miles of the line's route, a windshield reconnaissance survey to identify any previously unrecorded individual architectural resources, and a Phase 1 archaeological investigation. As a result of its background research and examination, Brockington identified 42 previously recorded archaeological sites within 1.25 miles of the line's route. The Phase 1 archaeological investigation included shovel test excavations at 30-meter intervals throughout the right-of-way and resulted in the recording of 5 new archaeological sites, each of which were determined to not be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Brockington also revisited 4 previously recorded archaeological sites, concluding that 2 of which are not eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, while the other 2 revisited sites could not be assessed without further work performed. Brockington is in the process of completing a Phase 2 archaeological investigation on these 2 sites. In short, Dominion Energy's decision to largely use the existing right-of-way route instead of evaluating other greenfield routes was proper in my professional judgment. Moreover, the company's decision minimizes the effects to environmental, land use, cultural, and scenic resources. No significant adverse impacts to these resources are anticipated. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. Chair Belzer, Mr. Parker, and Mr. Bass are available for cross-examination by ORS as well as examination by the commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Office of Regulatory Staff?
We don't have any cross at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Commissioners, questions for this panel? Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Good morning. Good to see you here. I'd like to start with an overview of this project, and you addressed that to a certain extent. And I understand the NERC reliability standards, but just in general, kind of what are the, is it a variety of growth that's causing this? Is it generation that's causing it? Just like you to talk about the realities behind the need to do this associated with reliability and meeting the NERC standards.
Sure. Let me do my best here to, I noticed in my summary I mentioned the reliability standards a couple of 2 or 3 times, but yes, so maybe just to sort of the lay of the land. So Charleston, of course, is growing rapidly, just like the entire state, but certainly Charleston and the Low Country is growing faster. If you look at Charleston, even with the resources that we have in place today, primarily being the Williams coal station in North Charleston, the load for quite some time in the area has exceeded the generation resources that we have. Not just ourselves. That's the same way with Santee Cooper, and of course we're very integrated with them. So there's been a deficit of generation for a while. That's getting worse as the load grows and not adding significant to any resources in the Charleston area. No solar, no real distributed energy resources to speak of. So that load continues to grow, and really that's just driving as you see that. Basically, I know we use the analogy of interstates. You need bigger, higher voltage transmission lines with bigger conductor, higher voltage to carry more power. So that, and just to tie the NERC reliability standards back in, those are all about what happens if you lose one of those circuits or 2 circuits back to back, or even a bus in a substation where you lose multiple circuits. What happens then at peak conditions? And when you run all those simulations, and we do it over a 10-year span, when you do that, then you'll see some of the smaller lines, the older lines, will start to overload as that growth continues to occur. That basically that power trying to flow from outside Charleston into Charleston when you lose some of the circuits that you already have in place. And so that's what happened in this case. A 115 line that was smaller conductor, older, was starting to show up as overloaded in the beginning in the summer of 27 under certain contingencies. And so we looked at what, how we could best address that. And of course, we're always trying to do everything we can on existing right-of-way. So we settled on what we decided to do was rebuild that line and bring in 230 kV that will extend 200. The higher the voltage, the more power obviously you can carry along the same conductor size. So we decided to build the best solution was to build a 230 kV line with bundled conductor that's, bundled is can carry twice the current of a non-bundled line. So those 2 things will basically solve the overload on the line that we saw, and while we're doing it, allow for plenty of room for growth as we continue to see see that growth continue. And in a future, although this wasn't the driver was still needed with Williams in place, but looking ahead to a future when Williams is not there, it will work well and be needed in that case too. So really, bottom line, this extends higher voltage and bigger conductor further into the peninsula from where it originates at Church Creek down to Charleston transmission, about 6.5 miles towards the load center.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad I asked the question.
Okay.
Was there any particular development or driver that also made this come to reality, this request?
No, not particularly. What we do, we run these assessments every year per the NERC reliability. You have to run the assessments every year over that 10-year horizon, so that you're keeping up with all the changes. I mean, there's always changes going on throughout the year, not just for ourselves, but neighboring utilities are updating what they're doing. So there wasn't any one specific driver. What we do, though, is when we run these assessments, we flag anything that is at 90% or more of its capabilities, so that we see things, you don't want to wait until not be alerted until something is at 100% or greater. You need to see that coming, because in this day and age, certainly breakers and transformers can take years to, from the time you order them to receive them. So, and that's getting longer. So really, it's just that annual assessment. We, saw this starting to load up, and wouldn't say there's anything necessarily in 2027 that drove that. It's just a gradual worsening of the conditions over time, and in the year 2027 was when it would exceed its capability, which is over 100%. So no one specific driver, just growth, continued growth.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Parker. I really enjoyed all of the maps because that's how I learn. And I would ask that you pick one and just kind of step us through what the investment would be in a broad picture. Like, I'm looking at the public version of the aerial photography map, and if you could just talk us through, and this is figure 3.1A. It doesn't have to be that one, but if you could just kind of paint that picture, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so yes, I actually amazingly turned to that right off the bat somehow. But you all have this picture in front of you. I assume I know it's not on the screen, but so basically, if you're looking at this zoomed in to Church Creek substation, where we have 230 kV and 115 kV on the far left there. So what we're doing is there is an existing old wood structures that go that have a 230 line and a 115 kV line that go from Church Creek down, going to your right to Faber Place substation. What we're going to do is, and those, again, as I said, are on old wood structures, H-frame, they take up a lot of space. But what we're going to do is tear that down and rebuild it with two steel structures, with one having just the new one having a new 230 kV line on it, and the other steel structure will have the 115 and 230 kV line on it. So you'll basically have you'll have more lines. The new one being a 230 kV line that stretches from Church Creek. It goes to Faber Place. The 230 kV will continue on and bypass Faber Place and continue east towards Charleston transmission about 2.5 miles, which again, you're heading towards the peninsula as it turns to your south, just off the picture towards the city of Charleston. So that 230 line will bypass the Faber Place substation and go an additional 2.5 miles to Charleston transmission, where there is no 230 kV. Right now, it's just 115 infrastructure there. So what we'll do is we'll terminate this new 230 kV line at the Charleston transmission substation, put a new transformer there that steps it down to 115 kV, and then those associated facilities we talk about will what we call fold in or terminate lines in the area that are currently in existence, terminate or fold those into this new substation, where basically what that does is gives you a lot more diversity of routing power at this new substation further into Charleston. So don't know if I gave you what you were looking for, but that's...
Commissioner Williams, could I follow up with something on that?
Yes.
Looking at this map, this figure 3.1-A, I just want to make sure that I was reading it correctly as I went through. And I'm looking at the path that you were just referencing. So the little red dots, according to the legend, are for the current 230 kV line. Is that correct? And I see Mr. Bass nodding his head.
That's correct.
If you need to jump, Mr. Bass, either one of you, this is for either one.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure I'm reading the maps
Certainly.
correctly. And then the little green dots that are right beside the little red dots is the current 115 kV line.
That's correct.
Okay. And the yellow highlight along that same pathway is the proposed new 230 kV line.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay. I see in the legend that there's a purple dots for a 46 kV line. Where is that? That's on down into Charleston, past the Charleston transmission substation. That was the only place I saw the purple dots.
I think that's accurate. That's just, I think, because it shows up on this map, but it's where you see it, as you just mentioned, but it's not really a part of this particular project, but it is on the map a little further past Charleston transmission.
Okay. I just want to make sure. So we're going from two lines that are there currently on the wooden poles to three lines that are going to be on two steel poles.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Sorry to interrupt.
I'm glad you did. I learned something new. I noticed in your testimony that the project will be in service by May 1st, 2027, which makes sense given what you've just shared. Do you have an estimated or hopeful start date?
Good question. I know we are still in the process of contacting homeowners, doing a title search. There are 6 property owners affected, so that process is still ongoing. Once that's done, I know we have also already, due to the long lead time, we have already ordered breakers and things and the transformer that take years. You know, certainly if we, you know, we could use those elsewhere if need be, but we order those just because to meet those kind of like a 3-year, in this case, time frame, we would need to get them ordered, you know, sooner rather than later. I don't know if the estimate, certainly we need to get the certificate to begin, but I presume, not certain, but I presume it would start once the property issues are taken care of later this year, as best I can say.
Could you describe what the impact will be to those property owners?
Sure. If I can direct you to page... Page 7 through 9 of the environmental report. It identifies the locations that new right-of-way will be required. So page 7 shows the 2 general areas. One is about a half a mile east of the Church Creek substation, and it's on the inside bend of that transmission line. Approximately, I believe that's about 50 feet wide there, just to accommodate that angle structure and the progression of the line north. The second area is at the crossing of the Ashley River. On the south side of the Ashley River, those structures are currently on 2 pole structures, the 2 lines. as is the structure on the north side of the river. So in order to accommodate that third alignment, we need a little bit more space there to build this new line.
Are we talking about edges of property?
We are.
Okay.
Yes.
The application, and you may have covered this, Mr. Parker, but the application talks about 19.5 acres of wetlands. And are the wetlands scattered along the 6.5 mile route?
They are.
And they total up to 19.5?
Yes.
Okay. And are the towers going to be located outside the wetlands and the wiring is above wetlands, or is it that specific, that clear?
The line has not yet been designed, and our intent is always to span wetlands where possible. But in one particular case with the Ashley River crossing, the critical area wetlands that are within that tidal boundary, we will probably have to have a couple poles there. But in other more upland areas, in other portions of the line, again, our intent would be to span those if at all possible. If we do need to access through those wetlands, that access will be on construction mats in order to minimize any kind of short-term impacts.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the education.
One
wanna add?
follow-up
Okay.
that I want to mention to your question, Commissioner Williams, earlier. I mentioned the property and the equipment that we ordered, but certainly, we would certainly not begin also until we get all the necessary permits, environmental and otherwise. And I don't know that we've gotten where we stand on those. I think Nathan maybe.
That is correct. They have not been obtained yet.
Yeah. So, and not sure the time frame on that, but certainly we would not begin until and I know those things sometimes take some time. So I just wanted to caveat my answer to you about when we would begin. It's all sort of contingent on, that's a big piece, obviously.
Okay.
Chair
And-
Belcher.
Just a moment. Commissioner Williams is not finished.
We might have been about to ask the same question. So Commissioner Caston, go ahead.
I apologize. I just wanted to follow up on that, if it was okay. And I understand the complexities with trying to estiblish an estimated start date with the remaining items that you have there. Do you have an estimated construction time, regardless of when it starts? 12 months, 24 months construction time, or do you know that?
I don't. Some of that will be, given that we're rebuilding current lines into Charleston, what we also have to do is to run this by the operations and control room area to make sure that, we can take the outages and build these things, not affect reliably operating the system. So some of that is yet to be coordinated as to, are there any restrictions on when this work can be done? So, I don't know that I have a good answer for you, but I think it's some of that work remains to be coordinated to determine just how long it will take once construction does begin.
On typical projects of similar size, in order to construct the line, we're generally allocated 9 to 12 months to get the line up in service, but that does not include any of the other substation improvements that may be needed. But again, those would probably be done simultaneously.
I believe that answers the question good enough, because since you have an established May 1st, 2027 in service date, I assume someone had to have an idea about how long it was going to take to come up with that date. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, and that's built into the time frame in order to go through this process as well, to do the environmental studies, and then to obtain this certificate. So if we start work at the beginning of the year, or at the end of this year, there should be ample time to complete the project by the in-service date.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Williams.
No further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Justin Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Mr. Bass, quick question for you. Do you know the results of the Phase 2 archaeological investigation performed by Brockington?
They are not yet complete, so they are still in the process of doing the field work and preparing their results.
Okay.
Commissioner, could you speak a little more into your microphone? You're awfully soft down there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Have you had any communication with them regarding the results so far?
So one of the resources that they identified and have progressed through, there's no indication that they would be eligible for the National Register, but they still have to go through the laboratory testing internally and additional research just to confirm those results. But every indication is, at this point, they do not look like they'll be eligible for the National Register.
Okay. And so based on what you know so far, you don't have any concerns?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair Powers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess either one of you could answer this. And it's nice that a lot of this is going into a previous footprint that Dominion is working under. Can you tell me how old this footprint is, or something about the footprint itself?
Sure. So the existing right-of-way between Church Creek and the Faber Place substation has an existing H-frame structure in it with a 230 kV line and a 115 kV line on it. So that single structure is about three poles. It crosses various residential land uses, some multifamily land uses in that first section. Once you get past the Ashley River, and then progress from Faber Place to Charleston Transmission, the majority of that right-of-way crosses more commercialized areas and more parallel to existing road corridors.
Yeah.
But within that road corridor,
I'd like to save you some time. The part I'm concerned with is the part that does touch wetlands and does touch the river and that sort of stuff. The good thing about the environment is that a lot of times, even when things are built, and I was on the Coastal Council for years, at some point the environment can repair itself somewhat. And I just wonder, where we're doing that work, would it be considered that the environment has repaired itself to some degree? Is this going to cause more damage or more destruction of any of the repaired wetlands?
I don't believe it would. We're going to be doing work on low ground pressure matting. And so with the limited amount of poles that would be required in that area and the construction measures that we implement, any short-term impacts will be mitigated, and I don't foresee any long-term impacts to those resources.
And since you don't have the permits yet, I know when you say DHEC, you're talking about the Office of Coastal Resource Management inside DHEC.
Yes, sir.
Is Dominion prepared, if necessary, if they require some sort of mitigation? Is Dominion prepared to do that?
It is my understanding that in order to obtain the permits, Dominion is prepared to do what is necessary if required to do so.
Okay. Just a couple other things. The report, either the report or the testimony says that 3 acres is unidentifiable. What's that mean?
Could you refer to
you talked about the proposed right-of-way, that there was 4.3 or 4.4 acres, and then listing the thing, the land use, it says 0.6 is residential, 0.7 is water, and 3 is unidentifiable.
It may not be a specific designated use, so it may just be vacant land, not particularly associated with a yard or a commercial use, just basically open land where it hasn't been utilized for a particular purpose.
Okay. And this is all going to be above ground?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you may be the best one for this one, Mr. Parker. What sort of with this sort of work, and this is major, amount of power you're going to be able to run through there, will there be, blackouts, or will there be areas or times of interruption that you could probably give me some idea about?
Well, certainly when I mentioned earlier, when we do this kind of work, it is well coordinated with the operations, the control room that communicates from Casey with the people in the field doing the work, and is looking at a day ahead, a week ahead, even months ahead, planning for any outages that we have to do, and what generation we'll have available to us, planning all that, running the same kind of studies we do, but running it in a nearer term with all the more real, nearer to real time lay of the land of the system, shall we say, to make sure we don't have anything like that happen. Sometimes that takes quite a bit of coordination with other outages that we're trying to do and other timelines we're trying to meet, not just with ourselves, but even with Santee Cooper, given work they're doing. But to answer your question, no, we do not expect that this will in any way result in any kind of blackouts or having to shed any load. If that's what you're referring to as far as getting this work done, it will just it just means that when you're doing work to an existing right of way to implement improvements and gains, sometimes to do that on existing right of way, it can be a challenge to coordinate it all and take those outages of lines feeding those load centers and building new infrastructure. But we will do it in a way that doesn't put customer reliability at risk while we're doing it.
To me, that just seems almost impossible, quite a challenge to do that. And if you do have to have an outage, do you have some like notice system to give customers that you're going to be out for an hour, or you're going to be?
Well, certainly we would not go into any kind of outages planning, where we foresaw outages, happening in advance. Were something to happen, really, it would be no different than whether there's storms or any kind of other outages where there was an unexpected or contingency or something where a line tripped that was not planned. If something happens where that's the case and folks are unfortunately their power goes out, it would be communicated through all our normal means where we update to everyone where the outages are and estimated restoration time through those normal channels. But we wouldn't have any, there would not be any kind of, we wouldn't go into an outage like this where we thought we had to put people in the dark to do the work in a planned way. We would just have to find another way, find another time, work with our neighboring utilities to make it where that wouldn't be needed. We just wouldn't go forward with that was a part of getting the work done.
So I guess the picture I have in my mind is you're putting in new stuff parallel to what's there, so you don't have to cut anything off to do that.
That would be the goal. I'm not sure if we'll be able to entirely do that in this case, but when you're working on existing right of way, but certainly if to the extent we can do that and not de-energize what's there, then that makes life a lot easier, where we're just adding the new line and not taking anything out. That's not always the case, and as you say, as these areas continue to grow, and that's one reason why we try to get ahead of these things, and because you need to be looking out ahead and seeing before it gets really problematic to do any kind of this work. You got to be sort of beefing up the infrastructure along, because at some point, if you don't have enough options or enough routes for the power to flow, you get into a situation where you can't hardly afford to take any of those circuits out to work on them, which is, as I said, especially with the way load down there is rapidly exceeding any kind of local generation we have. So, but yeah, where we can do that and not de-energize what we have, we do that. Makes life a lot easier.
Does the 2027 expected date, does that include that you've got to possibly deal with landowners in a situation?
Yes, we factor, well, the date that we determine is based on the studies we do to comply when we think we need it by per the studies that indicate when the problems will arise if we don't. But once we've identified this need and we start engineering and working on the project, we factor in all, in laying out everything, we factor in the time it will take to get what we're here for today, the certificate, all the, ordering the materials, all those things. So we believe we'll be able to meet that target. Certainly permitting can, and that's why I mentioned we've already ordered some of the equipment that would have, had we not, would have put this, possibly this target date in jeopardy. But certainly permitting can be a bit of a wild card. If you can't get it when you need it, then you have to take a step back. But we fully believe, based on everything we know today, that we'll be able to meet this May 27 timeline.
Well, not having the permits, you realize any decision we make is, dependent upon those sort of things.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Okay. Mr. Bass, one more question I thought of. Your company, what percentage of situations or arrangements do you go into where you say, no, you can't do that, that's not environmentally sound, that's dangerous, that's archaeologically wrong? Do you have you in your experience been put in that situation where you have to tell the utility you got to find a better way?
Fortunately, not very often, but when we see a situation that we think can be avoided, we definitely make that recommendation. And if something can't be done to overly avoid it, we do recommend mitigation measures. And I would remind that we basically can't do anything without the regulatory approvals for the various permitting agencies. So yeah. I think there's a lot of redundancy that occurs in our business in order to minimize impacts to various resources.
All right. One more question. Either one of you can take it. It's something I've wondered about. When you pick up any sort of magazine, such as Southern Living, Garden and Gun, or any major magazine, Charleston is advertised. Do either of you know how many people Charleston wants?
I can't answer that.
No comment?
Yeah, no comment. I mean, that's I have family that live down there. I like it up here, but yeah, it's I won't say anything more than that. I think it's apparently they don't see a limit just yet.
Well, I built a couple of years ago down south of there an extra home in the Beaufort area. I couldn't afford Charleston. It's growing so fast, and the people coming in. It's just an incredible market, and it's a great place. Best restaurants I think in the country. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, Beaufort is coming fast too. So.
Well,
but
like I think we said in another here, nobody retires and moves up north.
Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. Good morning. So, this is a real basic question. Generally speaking, which way will the power be flowing through these lines? Towards the Charleston Peninsula or West Ashley? I've kind of heard some things that make me go back and forth, and maybe it goes both ways. I don't know.
Generally, it'll be flowing towards Charleston and that peninsula, but and certainly mainly because of what I mentioned is the load just continues to grow there, and the generation is not there to match it. So load is generally, we use the term load. Power is generally, or current is flowing towards the load. So it's flowing typically from, in this case, Church Creek to Faber Place to Charleston transmission. In a grid, though, as you realize that, under these various contingencies, power always, in certain situations, could flow either direction. And that's why we have to run all these simulations to capture all those different possibilities. But in general, what drives these upgrades almost universally is power trying to flow into those load center areas towards the coast from areas outside of Charleston to Charleston. So in that direction.
Okay. And so we've heard a lot of discussions about the Kennedy site and something potentially happening there at some time. And just wondering, does this in any way have any connection or relationship to potential at Kennedy's?
No, it doesn't. This was identified as a need with the current fleet of resources that we have, Williams, Watery, no consideration to any potential Kennedy's plant. Although in all the different scenarios we're doing, I'll just say that, anytime we're looking at what we may possibly do, we're trying to keep an eye on, well, just like we are in a future without Williams, we're trying to see, well, what, if we do this or do that, is this project still needed? Or is it still, we don't want to go spend $40 million and then decide on some projects that have come in the interconnection queue, whether it's Kennedy's or anything else, and then decide that, oh, well, now this is not needed. So we always try to sort of do some sensitivities, we call them, to see, well, what if this happens, would that make this project no longer needed? And so this project is needed regardless, just for the growth in Charleston, but it really has nothing to do whatsoever with the proposed Kennedy's plant.
Okay. And so there was South Carolina Department of Natural Resources had a letter dated April 30th that they were working with the company to address issues with the project. Is there any more you can say about that, or any update or anything?
Yes, so we provided a response to the Department of Natural Resources, and they responded with a statement that they have no additional comments. So it is our understanding that we resolved their concerns and comments.
Okay. And you had mentioned that, I think you said there are two archaeological sites that may or may not develop into anything. So let's just suppose that turns out, there's some archaeological site. Can you address that by, let's just say, moving the poles? Or
potentially, yeah. And if we can't move the pole location because it's an angle structure or similar condition, we'll work with the State Historic Preservation Office and our Cultural Resources consultant to determine what mitigation measures would be appropriate. It's difficult to speculate what that mitigation measure would be, though.
Okay. And heard the term fold in here and there, and can you help me understand a little bit more about what does fold in mean?
So yes, that's terminology I think primarily Dominion uses, that not necessarily used industry-wide, but basically what that means is, say you have a line, in this case, running nearby this proposed Charleston transmission substation that goes from one sub to another in that vicinity. What we mean when we say fold in is we basically break that line into two segments, where at that substation where we terminate in the middle there, take that one end of that line and connect it to, say in this case, Charleston transmission, and then the other end we connect that to the same sub, and it goes on to where it originally terminated. So basically you just chop it up into two segments of a line. It still ultimately goes between points A and B, but we've just created a new point in between where it just, and that's what I mean when I say, when you do that and we're folding in three lines here, basically what it does is you have more options to route power and diversify the flow of power when you need to, or take lines out, because each of those will have breakers now, and you can route them as you need to, or take a segment out and have more flexibility for giving you more paths to get that power where it needs to go. So So that's, yes, fold in, that's sort of the idea is you're breaking a current line into two segments and terminating those ends into this substation that you're of interest. Did that work? Did that explain it?
That helps a bunch. I
Okay.
appreciate it. I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you today? Following up on Commissioner Carolee Williams' questions about additional right-of-way, as I look at the maps, it's just to allow the existing right-of-way to be widened. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And basically, is there an amount that is needed, certain number of feet or yards, or?
We've anticipated in total 4.4 acres.
I know, but it's not 4.4 acres. It's a square. It's kind of linear. So how much? NERC standards say how wide a right-of-way needs to be, right? Mm-hmm. So how much more right-of-way are you needing on one side is what I'm asking.
I believe it's approximately 50 feet.
Okay, just curious about that. And thinking about the NERC standards, I think on page 6, this is Mr. Parker's testimony. You referenced the NERC standards and also the long-range planning criteria that Dominion uses. How are those complementary, or are they complementary, or is one more stringent than the other? I don't think you could be adverse to the NERC standards, could you?
No, certainly not. The NERC standards have to be complied with, and that's a good question. The long-range planning criteria is criteria that we've used for many years, even before. Not that they've remained stagnant, but before the NERC standards were enforceable. But generally, what it amounts to is it's very a lot of overlap. They're very similar. The only, I think, major difference between our standards and what NERC requires is we do also look at a complete loss of a plant that has multiple units. So in the case of, say, Jasper, we would look at the loss of all 4 units on our, what that would do to our system, whereas NERC doesn't necessarily require that. So a little more stringent, but in general, they're pretty much overlapping almost every other way.
So the contingencies listed on page 7 of your testimony, are those all NERC, all long-range planning criteria, or a combination of both?
They are, it's a combination of both, I believe. Let's see.
I'm just curious. You don't have to identify which ones. I know that y'all have to plan for contingencies, and I was just kind of.
I think these exist in both. Now, I appreciate your question. I would just, since I know it, the one I was just talking about that is our own, that NERC doesn't necessarily require, is number 6, the loss of entire generating capacity in any one generating plant. But otherwise, these are all in both the NERC standards and our own criteria.
Were there any alternatives or explored? I know in Charleston, with all the density of population and the waterways, that I don't know what alternatives there may be, but were there any alternatives explored as far as a different route, even if it was a green route, not something already existing?
Because the existing corridor could accommodate the future line, we did not explore any greenfield routes.
Okay.
It was our opinion that any greenfield routes would just have significantly more impacts as opposed to what we could do within the existing corridor.
How about cost if you went a totally new route, greenfield route type? Would it make sense that would cost more than what is being proposed?
I would anticipate it would be more
Yes,
expensive.
absolutely. Especially the cost of land in that area. I will say, as far as alternatives, not to the route per se, we did look at the particular line that was overloading, that in the 27 time frame was the 115 line for the first leg of that map between Church Creek and Faber Place. We did look at just rebuilding that line on, between Church Creek and Faber Place to 230 instead of 115. That solved the immediate problem and would have been, being less mileage to build. That would have been less expensive. But what we saw then going out further past 27 was by doing that, what happens within the 10 years is then you start seeing, if you terminated that new line, 230 line into Faber Place, you would start to see other problems at Faber Place by stopping it there. As load continues to grow, you start to see the transformers overload. By putting another 230 line there, more power coming into Faber Place, you'd see other issues in the year like 31, 32 that would need to be solved. So by bypassing Faber Place and going to Charleston transmission, that solved the more near-term issue and the longer-term issue.
Well, and you can't just look at short term.
That's right.
Or just look at long term. You got to.
That's right. But that's why you need, as you say, you need to look out those 10 years. The problem we saw was in the year 27. But then you need to make sure not just for what you're assessing, but then whatever you come up with to try to solve the problem, that you don't.
It's not going to create.
Create another problem later or even at the same time. So that's why because in a lot of times it's not necessarily intuitive. You have to then go put this improvement back in the computer models, run all those thousands of contingency combinations and see, oh, I didn't think about, under these circumstances, now we have this problem. So yeah, that was the other sort of more direct or first alternative we looked at, but it created other issues a few years later. So yeah, these things are expensive. So trying to solve things for the long term, not, 10 years out and beyond, this was the solution. But being an existing right-of-way, these were the two primary alternatives we looked at.
Thank you. And with regard to potential impacts of rare, threatened, or endangered species, can you talk to me a little bit about any mitigating or protective measures that the company employs with regard to the construction of the project with regard to those species?
So we did an environmental investigation for the entire right-of-way width, not just where the line's going to be placed. That way we can account for construction access and the like. They identified no species in the right-of-way when they did their reconnaissance. There is potential habitat that could exist. And so for the small acreage of additional clearing, which amounts to less than 0.1 acres, if that were necessary to do, then we'll address that at the time for species that live in trees. So the bats, red-cockaded woodpecker, and the like. And when we get to that point, we'll have an environmental specialist on site to confirm that there's no species present in those cases.
And is that something that y'all would be working with DNR on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, Commissioners, anything further for these witnesses? Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Thank you. You try your hardest to get all your questions out at one time, but something leads to another. You've talked a lot about the impact and the benefit to Charleston Peninsula. Is there also a benefit to North Charleston?
Yes, anytime it is. Anytime if we bringing 230 kV transmission into Charleston transmission, that will benefit not just the peninsula, but really the whole area, including North Charleston. Certainly, what we see on a lot of these, maybe it's come up in other dockets. We generally treat Williams Station as a must-run unit. We keep it on if it's available most of the time because it's serving load in the area, so that minimizes transmission issues. But certainly the growth in North Charleston and then down into Mount Pleasant, adding this additional 230 infrastructure in the area and then, quote, folding those lines into this new substation will help the whole area. Certainly, and then certainly what it also does is allows us to not run Williams. I won't say we don't have to run Williams at all. We certainly will, but even if you don't want to run them at full output, run them less than that, getting additional infrastructure, and Williams is in the North Charleston area, it allows you to more freedom to maybe dispatch without having to say run Williams where you might otherwise have to for all that North Charleston and Mount Pleasant load as well. So yes, it's a benefit to really the whole area.
So I'm going to see if I understood that correctly. It allows you the flexibility to not count on Williams 100% of the time.
Yes, I would say not necessarily 100% of the time, as in there could be periods where we don't have to run it at all. But when it does run, maybe we don't have to run it at full output, but maybe 50% or so. Yes, it does allow that, because that was where we saw some of the issues in 27 was also in maintenance season, where we need to take that plant off. And then we have, even though in maintenance season loads are not as high, they still are growing. So, and again, you don't have any, real significant generation infrastructure, so, or generation resources. So yes, that's your characterization is correct. Not necessarily don't have to run it at all. Sometimes that may be the case, but certainly when it is running, it may not need to be running as at such a high output as without this upgrade.
What's maintenance season?
It's generally when we try to do all the maintenance work on our generating resources, and that's typically in the spring and fall in the low load periods. Yes, all the plants have various work they need to do, to keep everything running, and solar plants and others take outages too to do work occasionally. But maintenance season generally the spring fall season when loads are lower and you don't need as many resources online.
Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate it.
Anything further, commissioners? Mr. Burgess?
I have no redirect, Chair Belzer.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for being here this morning and for your testimony. Certainly appreciate hearing from you and you answering our questions, and you may stand down. Thank you. Mr. Burgess, anything further?
That concludes the company's case.
Thank you. Office of Regulatory Staff?
Yes, ORS calls Michael Seaman Wynn to the stand.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Ms. Mitchell, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Please state your name for the record.
Michael Seaman Wynn.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the Office of Regulatory Staff as the Deputy Director of Energy Operations.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared pre-filed direct testimony consisting of 9 pages on May the 8th, 2024?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you the same questions today as those posed in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Madam Chair, at this time, I would move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Seaman Wynn be admitted into the record of this case as if orally given from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Please present your summary to the Commission.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Commission. My testimony provides the results of ORS's examination and review of Dominion Energy South Carolina's application for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity for the construction and operation of the Church Creek to Charleston 230 kilovolt line and associated facilities. The proposed Church Creek to Charleston 230 kV line would extend approximately 6.5 miles from the company's existing Church Creek substation to the Charleston transmission substation. Associated facilities would be constructed at both substations to accommodate the new transmission line. Excuse me. The Church Creek to Charleston 230 kV line is necessary due to continued residential and commercial growth in the Charleston County area. The new line will help ensure continued reliable electric service to the company's customers. This concludes my summary.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, please answer any questions that the other party or the commissioners may have.
Dominion.
I do that too, Chair Belzer, from time to time. We have no questions.
Sorry. Thank you. Commissioners, questions for this witness? Mr. Seaman Wynn, based on your pre-filed direct testimony and your summary today, ORS supports the application of Dominion for this line?
We do, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Wynn, thank you for your appearance, your testimony, and you may stand down.
Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Rainey, anything further?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If there's nothing further to come before us today, I'm going to ask council to meet with our council to discuss a date for proposed orders, and we will conclude this hearing, and thank you for being here, and we'll notify you of our decision in an upcoming business meeting. Thank you. We are adjourned.